May the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. What to do with the unclean spirits? This is always a dilemma for preachers because we just don't talk like this anymore. This was the way they spoke and understood the world in Jesus' time, but our worldview is very different. Imagine being at a dinner party and bringing up the topic of unclean spirits and what a menace they are. It probably wouldn't go over so well. You would get quizzical looks to start and then probably complete avoidance for the rest of the night. Now, each Sunday that I preach, I go to my commentaries to get a sense of the reading of what other theologians and biblical scholars have to say. And so, especially with this one, with the unclean spirit, I wanted to see what they had to say. Some said, the unclean spirit is just not what this gospel is about. It's really about what Jesus does. Others said, it's really about evil and the power, Jesus' power over evil. Other commentaries basically said, good luck. So it left me in quite a quandary. I do think this gospel is about unclean spirits. It's an important part of the reading. And I also think it's about what Jesus can do and about the nature of God. It's about a guy who's caught up in something that in Jesus' day was called an unclean spirit. But it is something that has a hold of him and is making him sick. So I ask you, what is it in our world that grabs a hold of us and makes us sick? What is it in our world that doesn't belong in us? You know, that's what unclean means, basically. You know, if you have dirt in the middle of the center aisle right here, that's unclean. But that same dirt out in the garden, well, that's where it belongs. So unclean is about not belonging. So what is it in our world that grabs a hold of us that doesn't belong in us, yet we can't seem to get rid of? I think we probably all can think of things in our own lives that we've struggled with or are struggling with. And that's good enough for us right now. When I stand by the bedside of someone who is dying, I am so aware of how very little really matters in this life. How many cares and occupations, fears and anxieties govern our lives, and how so little of them matter in the end. I wonder if in our day, these are the unclean spirits, those things that really have a hold of us, that keep us from living a full life of love and service, and hold us strong in the grip of fear and anxiety. There are the big things that occupy our minds and our hearts and our souls, the things that we lay awake at night thinking about, the anxieties that we hang on to lest we be caught off guard when all we fear comes true. In the gospel, the moment where everything changes is when this man who is hurting so deeply addresses Jesus directly. What have you to do with us, Jesus, son of Nazareth? I know who you are, he says. You are the Holy One of God. In that moment, a relationship is established and a challenge is made. How often do we take what has a hold of us and offer it to Jesus in prayer? How often do we address Jesus directly, establish a relationship, and offer a challenge? I think it is a very un-Episcopalian thing to do. We like our Book of Common Prayer and the Lord's Prayer. We like to thank God for all the blessings we have been given. We like to see the grace that is all around us. We want to ask God to help us to be more loving, more of who God has called us to be. And these are great prayers, but they're also safe prayers. They're prayers that are just about one step removed from the nitty-grittiness of what's going on in our souls. How often do any of us really go to God in prayer and say, I am overwhelmed and failing, and I need help? It's a scary thing to do. Scary on the one hand because it might make a difference. And then we'll have to live into it. That's a scary prospect all on its own. It's also scary because it might not work, or so we fear. Maybe that tells us that God isn't real, or is completely disinterested in what burdens us. Maybe Jesus won't hear our prayer or answer. Maybe God has given us these fears and anxieties because we need to be tested or challenged, because we need to grow, or because we need to be punished. I don't think there is anything further from the truth. Would a loving parent willingly inflict suffering on their child to punish them or teach them a lesson? Life brings suffering all on its own. A God of love who desires health and well-being and wholeness of life for all of creation is not going to willingly inflict suffering upon us. It just doesn't make sense. A God of love isn't going to inflict suffering. A God of love is going to be in relationship with you and hear you and love you. This is what Jesus did with the man with the unclean spirit. He loved him. Tough love. He didn't let him off the hook. This was not nice guy Jesus. This was loving Jesus. And that love freed him from what held him captive. But it began with a man engaging Jesus. Healing is possible from whatever it is that has a hold of our lives. But first, we have to engage Jesus. We have to present ourselves in all our need, in all our brokenness, in all our humanity. Present ourselves to the God of love and ask for the help we need. Life is short, and so little of what occupies us matters in the end. Lives well lived are lives full of love. Ask the God of love to come and release you from whatever has caught you up in fear and anxiety, so that you may live a life captivated not by that fear and anxiety, but by a holy, gracious love.